3,950.
Yeah?
That is how many construction companies went bankrupt in the UK last year. Not projects, not bids,
Right.
companies.
Completely gone.
Gone. And the exact same warning signs are flashing right here in America.
They absolutely are.
So welcome to the deep dive. We are looking at a really massive stack of data today. Recent UK insolvency reports, industry purchasing data, and pretty fascinating survival playbook.
Which is really the core of what we need to get into today.
Right, exactly. Because our mission here is simple. We want to extract the vital survival lessons from the UK crisis and apply them directly to the US market. Whether you are a sub prepping for a bid or, just someone insanely curious about market shifts, this is something you really cannot afford to miss.
And I want to set the tone right out of the gate here. This isn't a doom and gloom discussion. We aren't here to ring an alarm bell and tell you to board up the window.
Definitely not.
What we are doing is looking at a highly concentrated real-world stress test. Understanding these sources provides a massive competitive advantage for well-run companies. The businesses that survive this specific kind of pressure don't just scrape by. They end up dominating the market share that's left behind by those who don't.
It's about being the smartest person in the room when margins start getting tight.
Exactly.
So let's look at the sheer scale of the crisis in the UK, because reading through these reports, the numbers are honestly sobering.
Yeah, they are.
3,950 construction companies bankrupt in 12 months. That makes construction the worst sector for business failures in the entire UK economy for 4 years running.
4 years.
We're talking about 17% of all UK company failures coming from this one single industry.
What's really fascinating here is what lies just beneath those bankruptcy numbers. Bankruptcies are the lagging indicator, right?
Right, they're the end result.
Exactly, they are the final stage of a much longer disease. The leading indicator is the distress data. And the analysts note that over 102,000 UK construction companies are currently in what they classify as significant financial distress.
102,000.
Yeah, it's staggering. And this isn't just a few badly managed companies making administrative mistakes. It is a systemic macroeconomic crush. The UK Purchasing Managers Index, or PMI, dropped to 44.5.
Which, for context, anything below 50 means the sector is actively contracting.
Right, it's shrinking. And when you look at the residential side, housing starts plummeted by 31% year over year. Private housing specifically is down 36%.
Imagine a third of your potential project pipeline just vanishing overnight.
It causes total panic.
It does. It causes panic bidding, which we'll definitely get into. But here is the detail from the data that really made me stop.
The subcontractor data.
Yes. When a contraction like this hits, you would intuitively think the massive general contractors are taking the hit.
Right.
Because they have the biggest overhead, the giant offices, the huge executive teams.
Sure.
But no, the insolvency data shows it is exactly the opposite. The hardest hit are the specialist trades, the subcontractors.
The folks actually doing the work.
Right, the plumbing outfits, the HVAC teams, the electrical contractors, the finishing crews. Why are the folks actually turning the wrenches, the ones taking the absolute hardest financial beating?
That is the crucial question, and it comes down to where the financial risk actually sits on a construction project. A large general contractor acts more like a project manager and a broker of services.
They're pushing paper.
Exactly. They manage the timeline, the client relationship, and the paper flow, but the specialist trades the plumber, the electrician. They're the ones buying the physical materials. They're the ones paying the hourly wages to the crews on site every single Friday.
Like they have actual cash leaving their bank accounts every week.
Immediate, unyielding cash outflows. So when the macroeconomic environment tightens, the GCs might squeeze their margins or delay a project start. But the subs are the ones bleeding cash while waiting to get paid for work they've already completed.
Which brings us to the root cause of all this. The underlying pattern that wiped out nearly 4,000 companies.
Right. If we look at the behavioral pattern driving these failures from the sources, it is the habit of chasing volume over margin in a rising cost environment.
Chasing volume.
Yeah, it's that psychological trap of thinking, I just need to win this next bid to keep my crews busy, even if I'm barely breaking even.
Because in a stable economy, where a 2x4 costs the same in June as it did in January, you might actually survive that.
You might. But in an economy where materials are getting more expensive by the month, bidding for volume with razor-thin margins is effectively signing your own insolvency papers.
And here is where it gets really, really interesting for you listening to this right now in the US. Because if you think the UK market is just some isolated problem across the pond, Let's look at the U.S. numbers hitting contractors today.
The exact same cost pressures?
Literally the exact same. The reports highlight that U.S. steel prices are up 20%, aluminum is up 33%. Diesel, which is the lifeblood of moving anything anywhere on a job site, is sitting right around $4.60.
Yeah.
You are dealing with the identical rising cost environment that just decimated the UK specialist trades.
The parallels are undeniable, and this is exactly how a company falls into what the analysts call the cash flow death spiral.
The death spiral.
Yes, let's walk through the anatomy of this spiral step by step, because it happens in plain sight, and it usually starts with a completely logical decision.
Okay, let's do it.
Step 1. You are feeling the pressure of a slowing market. Your pipeline looks a little thin, and you have guys on payroll who need to work. So you submit a bid at a dangerously thin margin.
Right. You get the call, you won the bid, you tell the team, great, we've got work for the next 3 months. But your margin is basically non-existent. You are just trading dollars to keep the lights on.
Exactly. Then comes step 2. Material costs inevitably rise. Remember those steel and aluminum numbers?
We go up 20, 30%.
Right. The macroeconomic reality does not care about the estimate you submitted to the GC 3 months ago, which leads directly to step 3.
Yeah.
You are now forced to buy the physical materials you need to actually execute the job.
And this is where the on-the-ground reality hits so hard. You budgeted $10,000 for materials back in spring. Now it's summer, it's time to pull the trigger on the purchase. And the supply house is charging you $13,000.
Yeah.
You just lost your entire profit margin and maybe even dipped into your own cash reserves before your guys have even turned a single wrench on the site. You are now effectively paying for the privilege of working on this project.
That is a perfect way to phrase it. You are financing the GC's project. And then comes step 4 of the spiral, the fatal blow.
The payment delay.
The payment delay. You have paid for the expensive materials you have paid your labor every Friday, but you don't get paid by the GC for 60 to 90 days.
Wow.
You have locked in yesterday's low margins with today's high costs and tomorrow's vague promise of payment. The gap between your cash going out to the supply house and your cash coming in from the GC becomes a complete chasm.
And if you are relying on the cash from Project B to float the material costs on Project A, the spiral just tightens. It's like running on a treadmill that's constantly speeding up, but someone is slowly turning off the oxygen in the room.
That is exactly what it feels like.
You're working harder, you're buying more supplies, but you're suffocating. And reading through the data, the analysts pinpoint the exact moment that suffocation becomes permanent.
Yes.
They found a specific number of days, 45. Do not let your receivables age past 45 days.
Period.
The insolvency reports show that 45 days is the absolute tipping point where financial distress turns into total collapse.
And if we break down the mechanics of aging receivables, 45 days makes perfect sense mathematically. Let's look at it from the perspective of your core expenses. If you pay your crews weekly at 45 days, you have fronted over 6 weeks of labor costs entirely out of pocket.
That's massive.
It is. But more importantly, you have hit the 30-day net terms with your own suppliers.
Let's pause there and really clarify what that means for a newer business owner, because hitting those 30-day net terms isn't just a gentle reminder email from your vendor, right?
No, not at all. Net 30 means you have exactly 30 days from the invoice date to pay your supplier in full. By day 31, your supplier isn't your partner anymore. They are a creditor demanding payment for the $50,000 in lumber or copper piping they gave you.
And if you don't pay?
If you don't pay, they cut off your credit lines. You cannot buy materials for your other jobs. So at 45 days, you've drained your cash on labor, your suppliers have shut you off, and the GC still hasn't cut you a check.
Everything stops.
Everything. The weight of the entire project has fully shifted onto your shoulders. If the GC disputes a line item or delays payment by just another 2 weeks, you simply do not have the liquidity to absorb it. The structural integrity of your business snaps.
Okay, so that is the anatomy of the crisis. That is how 3,950 companies died. But what does this all actually mean for you? If you are listening to this and feeling a knot in your stomach because you have multiple invoices sitting at 35 or 40 days right now.
This is where we pivot.
Yes, this is where we stop looking at the wreckage and start looking at the survivors.
Yeah.
Because the financial playbook we are reviewing, it doesn't just give us an autopsy report. It outlines how the well-run companies made it through. And the very first step they recommend is what they call a self-audit, specifically calculating your months to zero.
It is a brilliant, brutally honest metric. Months to zero is exactly what it sits like. You need to sit down with your books and calculate precisely how long your business could survive, paying your core overhead, your rent, your equipment, leases, your essential staff, if your single biggest client stopped paying you today.
Not if they slowed down, but if they went completely dark.
Completely dark. Could you survive 3 months? 1 month? 2 weeks?
For a lot of the UK companies that went under their months to zero was probably measured in days. But the ones who made it through, they operated differently.
The analysts break down 3 specific moves that separated the survivors from the casualties. Let's dig into the first one, which is discipline.
The discipline to refuse to bid below true cost. This is entirely behavioral. The survivors had the courage to walk away from bad jobs.
Which is so hard to do.
Incredibly hard. When a GC pushed back and said, you need to sharpen your pencil on this quote, the survivors looked at their true costs, factoring in realistic material inflation, and said, no, that is the price. Any lower, and we lose money. They consciously chose to have idle crews rather than busy crews that were actively bleeding the company's cash reserves. I have to push back on this a little bit, though, because it is easy for us to sit here and talk about the mathematics of discipline. But if you are a subcontractor and you have 15 guys on your payroll who rely on you to feed their families, how do you just look at them and say, we are going to sit this one out? That discipline sounds great on paper, but isn't it nearly impossible in practice when livelihoods are on the line?
It is agonizingly difficult. There's no getting around that. But you have to reframe the scenario. If you take that underpriced job to keep those 15 guys busy, you are guaranteeing a cash flow crisis in 60 days. You won't just be telling them you don't have work. You will be telling them their paychecks are bouncing because the company is bankrupt.
Wow.
Taking a loss-making job doesn't protect your employees. It actively endangers them. The survivors understood that true job security comes from a profitable balance sheet, not just a full schedule.
That is a harsh reality, but it makes complete sense when you look at the fallout, which leads right into the second survival move, and it ties back into that months to zero audit. It's diversification.
The golden rule, established by the successful UK trades, is that no single client should account for more than 20% of your total revenue.
20%.
That's the cap. If you have a whale client that makes up 40 or 50% of your business, you don't actually own an independent business. You are essentially a highly leveraged employee of that GC carrying all of their financial risk.
Yep.
If that one massive client gets caught in a cash flow crunch and delays your payments by 60 days, your company dies with them. By capping client concentration at 20%, you ensure that even if your biggest customer defaults, you still have 80% of your cash flow intact to keep the lights on and pivot.
It's about insulating the ship, right? You can take a hit to one compartment, but the whole ship doesn't sink. You need watertight doors.
Exactly.
And before we get to the third survival move, the sources actually detail a specific sub-protection playbook here. Things you can do right now to protect your cash flow on these projects.
Yes, the defensive mechanics of the contract. This is vital.
So what are the actual tools in that playbook? Because you aren't just at the mercy of the GC, right?
No, you have leverage if you build it into the contract up front. The playbook outlines 4 key protective measures. First is negotiating retention release schedules. Instead of waiting until the entire massive project is finished to get your 10% retainage back, you negotiate to have it released as soon as your specific phase of work is completed and signed off.
Which gets that cash back in your hands months earlier.
Exactly. Second is strict progress billing. You do not wait until the end of the month to bill for massive chunks of work. You bill every 2 weeks or tied to very specific milestones.
Keep the cash flowing constantly.
Right. Third is utilizing joint check agreements. If you are struggling to get credit from a supplier because the market is tight, a joint check agreement means the GC writes a check payable to both you and your supplier. It guarantees the supplier gets paid, which keeps your material pipeline open.
Oh, that's smart. That bypasses the credit crunch entirely.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
And the fourth part of the playbook is mechanics lien awareness. You have to know your absolute strict deadlines for filing a preliminary notice and a lien in your state. The survivors didn't bluff. If they weren't paid, they filed the paperwork immediately.
They enforce their rights.
Every single time.
Okay, that is incredibly practical. And that brings us to the third big survival move from the UK data, the buffer. The survivors maintained a 3-month cash reserve minimum as an absolute non-negotiable rule.
Non-negotiable.
Not a line of credit that a bank can revoke, not projected incoming revenue. 3 months of hard cash in the bank to cover operating expenses.
And this is where the previous two rules make the third rule possible. You cannot build a 3-month cash buffer if you are constantly bidding at a 0% margin just to win the job. You have to win profitable work and you have to protect those profits.
Right.
More importantly, that 3-month buffer is what gives you the power to enforce the 45-day tipping point rule we talked about earlier.
That's the key.
It is. When a client hits day 40 of non-payment, you have the financial breathing room to stop work, pull your crews off the site, and demand payment without missing your own Friday payroll. The companies that went bankrupt couldn't pull their crews because they desperately needed the promise of that next check just to survive the week.
It is the difference between operating from a position of strength versus a position of panic. But let's talk about the reality of implementing this playbook. Because tracking the 45-day tipping point across dozens of invoices, monitoring client concentration percentages, updating real-time material costs to ensure your bids are accurate,
It's a lot.
it is a massive administrative nightmare. Most trades are already wearing 10 different hats. They're doing estimates at 9 p.m. on a Tuesday. Relying on a manual spreadsheet to catch a 45-day aging receivable before it kills your business seems incredibly risky.
It is risky, and frankly, manual tracking is usually where the system breaks down. By the time a contractor reviews their profit and loss statement at the end of the month, or worse, at the end of the quarter when their accountant sends it over, the cash flow death spiral has already pulled them under.
It's too late.
Way too late. That is why the Survival Playbook explicitly highlights the adoption of technology, specifically tools like the Smart Business Automator.
How does that actually change the game for a sub on the ground?
It shifts financial management from a retrospective chore to a real-time defense mechanism. What this technology does is integrate directly with your invoicing and estimating. It tracks the aging of your receivables day by day automatically.
Okay.
It alerts you the second an invoice crosses day 30, warning you that day 45 is approaching. It calculates your client concentration in real time, sending an alert when a specific GC is creeping toward that 20% revenue limit. And crucially, it can cross-reference your current bids against real-time material cost spikes.
So it is essentially a dashboard warning light flashing red before the engine blows up. It takes the administrative burden off your plate so you can actually focus on making the hard decisions rather than spending hours just trying to find the data.
Precisely. Having that level of visibility means you remove the emotion and the guesswork from the equation. The data tells you exactly when to pull your crews, when to reject a bid, and when a client is becoming too risky. You don't have to rely on a gut feeling. You have the math right in front of you.
Okay, let's take a breath, because I know we just threw a ton of intense analysis and survival tactics at you. From the 350 bankruptcies to the 45-day tipping point, all the way to the sub-protection playbook and the 3 non-negotiable survival rules.
It's heavy stuff.
It is. If you're feeling a bit overwhelmed by the gravity of these numbers, I want to bring it back to what we promised at the very beginning of this deep dive. This is not a horror story. This is a blueprint for domination.
It absolutely is. And this is the contrarian opportunity that is so vital to understand. If you implement this playbook, if you calculate your months to 0 today, build that cash buffer, find the discipline to refuse bad bids and monitor your receivables like a hawk using automation, this volatile, high-cost environment is actually the absolute best time for your company to grow.
Walk us through that psychology. Because most people hear market contraction or skyrocketing material costs, and their first instinct is to hide under the bed and just try to survive. How is this an opportunity for growth?
Think about the 102,000 UK companies currently in significant financial distress. Think about the competitors in your local market right now who are desperately chasing volume, undercutting bids by 15% and burning through their cash.
They're digging a hole.
They are going to fail. And when they fail, 2 things happen immediately. First, a massive amount of market share suddenly opens up. Second, the general contractors and the property owners who got burned mid-project by those failing subs are going to be desperate.
Oh, I see.
They will need reliable, financially stable partners to come in and rescue the job.
And if you've been disciplined, you have the crews, the cash, and the capacity to step into that void.
Exactly. And you don't step in at a discount. You get to command premium pricing because you are offering the one thing everyone else lacks: certainty.
Certainty in an uncertain market.
Yes. Your weaker volume-chasing competitors are dying off, literally clearing the path for your sustainable, highly profitable growth. You transition from being just another bidder to being the premium, reliable option that clients have to hire.
You aren't just surviving the storm, you're using the storm to wipe out the competition that has been dragging down prices for everyone else.
Precisely.
But it requires unparalleled discipline right now, today, before the squeeze gets tighter.
It requires action while you still have the luxury of making choices before the market makes them for you.
And that is exactly why we had to look at this data today.
Yeah.
So here is my direct call to action for you listening. Take this information and audit your business. But beyond that, please like, share, comment, and subscribe from whatever platform you are listening on right now. It helps us keep bringing you these insights.
It really does.
But more importantly, and I mean this sincerely, take a link to this audio and share it with a contractor you know. Share with that buddy in the trades who, has been taking on too many jobs, chasing volume, stressing about Friday payroll, and dealing with slow-paying GCs. Getting them to understand the cash flow death spiral and that 45-day tipping point might literally save their business.
And as you look at your own pipeline and your own estimates this week, I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over. We've seen how quickly a changing economy can expose hidden structural flaws in an industry. If a booming market hides bad margins, what is the true hidden cost of the next safe bid you are about to submit just to keep your crews busy?